The question on everybody's mind, who did the deed? Who ended the run of World Championship Wrestling? Was it Brad Siegel deciding he didn't want to run the goddamn thing? He hated professional wrestling and he wanted to facilitate a deal, violating FCC regulations. And the FCC won't let me be me, but you go to prison if you were found out to be in violation of that shit. Was Stu Snyder involved in that? I don't goddamn know, because no, he wasn't going to take it. Stu wasn't going to take it. Wait, that's a different Snyder taking it anymore. Who goddamn knows if that was the case? Maybe Eric Bischoff got a blank checkbook and signed everybody under contract he possibly could. People that had no business being in WCW, like Lanny Poffo, getting reportedly about $1 million over 4 years, $250,000 a year. All of the money that they were spending, it was astonishing. Maybe Ted Turner, like in that episode of Family Guy, was sitting in his bathtub. No, I want this toy, I want this toy. Putting idiots in charge from the moment he bought the goddamn company. Jim Herd, George Scott, so many others. Bill Watts not being able to exist in a corporate environment, and pretty much leading to the exit of Paul Heyman. And if you know anything about Paul Heyman, yeah, I think we kind of know what Bill Watts ended up saying to him, allegedly, covering my goddamn ass. But maybe, just maybe, it was Jamie Kellner sticking a knife into the goddamn corpse and just dragging it further and further and further down, and taking a wine bottle, stuffing it in the mouth, and shattering it like Sorority Row. That's why Diamond Dallas Page said it best. And that's why I say, fuck you, Jamie Kellner. And yeah, fuck Jamie Kellner. I'm glad he's dead. And if you happen to be anybody related to him or anybody that knew Jamie Kellner, I'm not sorry at all that your husband, your father, your uncle, your close relative, your kissing cousin, your acquaintance, a guy you ran into at the goddamn coffee shop. I do not care. I'm fucking glad Jamie Kellner is dead, because that piece of shit, I think that I wouldn't have liked him very goddamn much. I don't like Brad Siegel either. But Brad at least seemed a little bit sympathetic. But Jamie Kellner, nah, fuck that guy. But who did the deed? Well, let's discuss. I'm John Redland with Who Killed WCW Episode 4, The Final Nitro. The very last episode of this long-running 4-episode series. Yeah, from the Dark Side of the Ring guys and Rock the Dwayne Johnson. Okay, a lot of this stuff has been discussed to death. The one cool thing that I liked about this particular episode was the behind-the-scenes footage of the final Nitro, where, what was it? The hell was his name? Scott Lansing of, East Lansing, Michigan, I imagine. He, recorded this stuff. And you know what? It was cool. It was cool to see that stuff, because they were in Panama City, Florida. It was great. It was great to see that stuff. And I'm going to say this before I get into any, mean stuff. After basically wishing that Jamie Kellner hadn't lived as long as he had, and being glad that he's gone. And they didn't know at the time, by the way, because this was recorded a bit ago. Yeah, news came out recently that he died. What I did enjoy about this is it reminded me, even at its worst, what a time it was to be a wrestling fan. You had WCW, you had WWF. I mean, whether you had WCW on top, WWF, being a bottom, WWF on top and pounding and repeatedly destroying WCW. A lot of things were self-inflicted with WCW. Merger or not, I don't know if WCW would have survived. And for all the reasons I listed, for all the reasons I've listed in the previous episodes, it wasn't sustainable, even though they had some great success. I can go back and watch some of those Nitros. I can watch some of those pay-per-views. Because believe me, I can watch some of the pay-per-views from WWF in 96, 97, 98, even 99. 99, I would argue, had the worst string of WWF pay-per-views that you could ever find. And they were still wildly successful. You know what wasn't wildly successful? WCW. Because after Super Brawl 9, and I discussed this, they would never achieve 485,000 pay-per-view buys again. Uncensored dropped to like 325,000. I'll get to that, but they would get to where they weren't even doing 100,000 pay-per-view buys. So good job, WCW. You played yourself. Brad Siegel did say later that WCW killed itself, and yet he's not wrong, because it was going to erode. But anyway, we see footage of the various talents, seeing the end. We hear from the late, great Chris Kanyon, Dustin, Jimmy Yang, whose daughter apparently is working in MLW. Jimmy Yang, by the way, is 45. 45. 43, 45, something like that. That means he was like a teenager, maybe 20 years old when he was in WCW. That is nuts. That is nuts to me. They lost $60 to $65 million in 2000. I mean, that's reported. I actually don't know if it's more than that. They lost $10 to $15 million in 1999. And they were grossing a bunch of goddamn money. And even 96, I believe they turned a profit in the late 95. Very, very small, but still. 96, they were making money. 97, they were making money. 98, I don't know if they made as much as they made in 97. But they were still making quite a bit of money. But they were spending so goddamn much that they had to keep selling out shit. What does that sound like? Another company that's on TBS and TNT. The Turner merger footage. Look, the .com bubble was going to burst. AOL was at the forefront, but nobody wanted to deal with dial-up anymore. And yes, kids, dial-up internet. You had to plug the phone line into the goddamn computer. That was the kind of shit we had to deal with. Yeah, real prehistoric. AOL would have 55% of the company. And Ted and others would have 45%. Now, executives got paid quite a bit of money. Ted Jr. talked about how it was basically a Ponzi scheme, and it was, because AOL, I mean, look at the state of AOL now. Look at the state of AOL 15 years ago. It isn't the same, because other ones came along that were better. Google came along that was better. It wasn't avoidable. Yeah, I mean, if an entity hadn't bought WCW or hadn't merged with Turner might not have had all those faculties even back then. WCW drove away pay-per-view buyers. Guy Evans, I think is the name of the author of that WCW book that I believe he did with Bischoff. Uncensored 99 had Flair and Hogan on top and did 325,000 pay-per-view buys. A year later, Uncensored 2000 did 60,000 pay-per-view buys. I thought it was more around 80 or whatever, but still, whatever it is, 81% drop. And the thing is after Mayhem 99, which was just 8 months later, they would never hit 200,000 pay-per-view buys again. They wouldn't hit 100,000 pay-per-view buys after Bash at the Beach 2000, and they just got to 100,000. That's from WrestleNomics, by the way. The losses were nuts. There were a lot of losses. Now, yes, there were losses from the merger that were probably laid off and shifted around and stuff like that to make WCW look worse. Maybe, but the thing is WCW was losing so much goddamn money anyway. So even if the merger hadn't happened, it would have come out that WCW was losing quite a bit of money because they were having to tape Nitro and Thunder the same night. They had a smaller set. They weren't drawing nearly as big of crowds. I don't think they got over 10,000 people for any pay-per-view after, Uncensored 2000? Maybe Spring Stampede 2000? I don't think they did. I could be totally wrong, but I don't believe they got more than 10,000 people after maybe Sold Out 2000, maybe Super Brawl 2000. They were eroding. They were eroding fast. Ted had no power anymore. The merger happened, or was made official on January 11th, 2001. Good thing that's the worst thing that happened that year. That's the worst crash that happened that year. Sir, second.com crashes happen. I'm sorry. I had to. I have to have humor. Bischoff was going to find a buyer. There's Peter Gruber. Hans Gruber's brother, who was also Hans Christian Andersen Gruber's brother, a deep cut there. He was in charge of Mandalay Sports and Entertainment. He found Fusion Media Ventures, who would end up creating what would become ESPN Classics. They put up $5 million. They raised $62 million in the market, I guess. WCW is not worth $67 million at this point, by the way. They weren't. The roster was depleted. They could build people, but it was going to take a while. They were going to go to Vegas. It was going to be a new arena built on top of the Hard Rock, hotel, the Hard Rock Vegas. And it was going to hold about 3,500 people. They were going to be based in Vegas, and that might have actually been smart. It worked out for Vern. Didn't work out for Vern. The relaunch is going to be the Big Bang, not the Big Bang Theory, because the WCW pay-per-view actually would have been good. Fuck the Big Bang Theory. Can't understand why that show was ever popular. It's going to take place on May 6, 2001. And Brian Bedell, which just sounds like some kind of like medication for, I don't know, allergies. He wanted, it was like a conference call thing. He wanted Fusion to take WCW to be number one again. It was going to be a 10-year deal on TNT and TBS, or maybe just TBS. It was one of the two, but it was for 2 hours Monday and Thursday night. Personally, I think they would have been better off doing Monday night and maybe negotiating in a few years for 2 hours on Thursday, because that was a big issue with it. Having a 2-hour program to start out with the new one and then add the 2 hours later would be good. Jamie Kellner, again, glad he's dead. It's over. Get rid of it. Now, look, to be fair, WCW was losing a whole lot of money, but the AOL Time Warner merger lost way more money, as people have pointed out to me. Now, if you want to get rid of WCW, fine, but they needed to give a chance for it to actually be sold. Gainesville, Florida, the second to last Nitro. Bischoff basically says, we're going to give WCW a send-off, because it might be done. Stu Snyder, former executive vice president of Turner Home Entertainment, and then he loved MSG. He loved going to MSG. He loved wrestling as a kid. He became the president of WWF, well, the chief content officer, or chief operating officer, I believe. And could we buy WCW? Yeah, they kind of make their deals and everything, because him and Brad knew about, like, hey, if there's any opportunity, let us know. We're interested. If you can't find anybody else, we're interested. So, who knows? I mean, insider trade, I don't know about that. March 23rd, 2001. Vince buys WCW. I vividly remember, like, people telling me, I mean, I remember being on the internet, but people tell me, like, what do you think? Like, because I had friends that I talked to at the time. I'm like, holy shit. I knew WCW was bad. Believe me, I was watching the program. I revisited and rewatched the entire last year of WCW from the reboot episode all the way to the goddamn end. Jesus Christ, that company was dead when the reboot episode happened. But then we see footage of the last Nitro. Vince opens. The fate of WCW is in my hands. And The Rock, it felt like the end of an era. By the way, The Rock was the worst talking head here, but he had to do it. He had to be on here because his company was helping this. Goldberg talked about, how his bullshit. Goldberg was also out injured. He got taken out because of a retirement match. I believe it was against Buff Bagwell and Lex Luger at WCW Sin, the same pay-per-view where Sid broke his leg, because Johnny Ace, I believe, said, hey, come off the second rope with a big boot. I wish Johnny Ace had been in that place, and I wish it would have been his damn neck. So anyway, at least we would have been spared. People power! Goddamn laryngitis possessing son of a bitch. Hopefully he loses his goddamn ass for all the shit he was involved in. But wrestlers were both sad and pissed. They would go out and they would be happy doing their match. And I do remember watching the last Nitro, and it was weird. The simulcast was strange. Booker was thrilled because he had won the championship. And, he knew he had a chip in the game. Nash sat at home and was watching. I'm going to watch the Titanic sink. Nash also had a retirement match where he lost to Scott Steiner at Super Brawl Revenge. The fact I remember that is saying something. That's the famous one where he, you might have seen the gif where he takes the blanket off and gets out, and actually it's just a cast that's hooked up on the goddamn thing, and he comes back and faces Scott Steiner. One of the few things they did right in the last few months of WCW is build up Scott Steiner as a beast, as opposed to what the fuck he was built up as, just on his own. Clearly not with any enhancements. Not that he was the only one, but good goddamn Christ. Eric felt bad for the people that meant a lot to the company, but he couldn't watch it. DDP is like, that's why I say fuck you, Jamie Kellner. Vince bought it for like $4.3 million. There are wrestlers in that company that could have bought that. Hogan and Bischoff could have bought it. I mean, Bischoff did agree, but, WCW's worth $20 without the television deal, and he's right. And then Bob Ryder felt it was an inside job. Yeah, read up how Bob Ryder interacted with fellow TNA talents, Chris Harris and a few others. Let's just say where there's smoke, there's fire. There's a reason why he always kind of creeped people out as being just a little bit off, allegedly. So anyway, he posts something about, it being an inside job, how Brad and Stu were working together, as if Bob Ryder knew anything about wrestling. You could tell he didn't. I don't care how long he worked in wrestling. I don't care how long he worked in TNA. He didn't seem like he really understood anything. So, Brad knew that he was the wrong person to run it. At least he admits it. Still, he does seem like the type of guy you'd want to slap. Any wrestling fan would want to slap him because he just looks like a piece of shit. So The Rock is like, The Rock makes a list. He makes a list of people he wanted to face, and Savage was one of them. Savage wasn't even part of WCW anymore. His contract ran out before that. And made, deal about Goldberg. Goldberg wouldn't come in for another couple of years. Stu said we didn't buy it just to kill it. Now, I believe that Stu Snyder believes that. I don't for a second believe that Vince McMahon had any other intention other than basically waiting for just one slip-up and the fans to just say boo, for one reason, and then he was going to kill the whole thing. Booker and DDP took the buyout. There were plenty of other wrestlers that sat home for a year or a couple of years on their guaranteed contracts, and I don't blame them. I don't. If they're going to get that much goddamn money to sit at home, especially Nash. I mean, Nash was beat up. Hogan, I think, still had his money. Because even though Hogan had left WCW, I think Hogan still had some kind of contract. You had the lawsuit, you had all that. Hall, I think, was gone from the company, but you had plenty of people. You had Goldberg that was there for 2 years. I think he was like at an All Japan show in August of 2002. Flair had almost a year because he showed up in November of 2001, the night after Survivor Series 2001, when the Alliance, God, that whole damn Alliance fiasco, good Lord. I remember retro-viewing everything from the King of the Ring episode, King of the Ring 2001, all the way to the supermarket brawl between Austin and Booker, which I know was about almost a month after the Invasion angle, and I stopped. There were some good things, but that crash TV mentality. NWO in 2002, Hall fell off the wagon because he lost at Mania 18. I hate to say it, but I don't know if that was the exact tipping point. I know that Scott Hall's passed away, but who might argue, Nash talked about how it was a terrible time in his life, and it was terrible that he lost his friend. Vince, basically he bought it to bury it. I will not be convinced otherwise. Yeah, the idea was maybe have Monday Night Nitro and SmackDown, but the network didn't want it. Well, also they ran Buff Bagwell and Booker T, who I don't care if you had that goddamn thing with every WCW fan left in the Georgia Dome and sold that damn thing out. No, I don't care if you did. It would not have worked because it's Booker T and Buff Bagwell. Booker T, who's a legit athlete. Buff Bagwell, who had a great look, and that was it. Name one really good Buff Bagwell match. Name one that you can go back and watch and be like, yeah, he actually wasn't that bad. He was adequate in the ring. But Bischoff then arrives in WWE, because it was WWE at that time, in July of 2002, July 15, 2002. I vividly remember being absolutely just flabbergasted. And then the spot where he dresses up like the old priest, and I just hear myself say 3 minutes. That moment will stick in my mind for the rest of the time. And then he got fired in like December of 2005 off of TV. I think he actually had a little bit more time on his contract, and I think was gone sometime in 2006, 2007. I think he was kept under contract, but he was just gone off TV because they're like, we want to go in a different direction. Or maybe they just paid him for the few appearances he made in 06 and then one in 07. But then who killed WCW? Turner Corporate is what one person said. Time Warner executives. The top guy's not getting out of the way, Conan said. I mean, yeah, to an extent, but was Conan really going to be a draw in WCW? WCW killed itself, is what Brad Siegel said. Nash says Brad Siegel. He's not wrong. And Bischoff and Russo, are who Brett blames, and I love Brett in these. Good God, I love Brett in these. It was a hell of a time to be a fan. It was. It really, really was. There was a nice closing moment where Nash got footage, or Nash was saying, Hey, Bischoff deserves a lot of credit. He's the only guy that they can say he beat WWE. He beat Vince McMahon 83 weeks in a row. Consecutively, by the way, in case you don't understand what in a row means. And that's pretty, and Bischoff's like, cool. And Bischoff now says he has memory. He has memories that are more like still photographs. I mean, and he's almost 70, and time waits for nobody. So I'm sure there are fleeting memories, but he seems happy. And you know what? Everybody seems happy. I feel bad for the crew and the wrestlers that had to struggle after the whole thing, after WCW went under. I'm going to pose this question to you in the quote. I'm actually going to do this. Say Bischoff's group buys it. How long do you think WCW would have survived? I'd say 3 to 5 years. I don't think that they would have lasted the 10 years. I don't think there was any way for them to last 10 years. I think that they could have held some pay-per-views at mid-size arenas, drawn some decent ratings. If Kellner was on board, or if somebody other than Kellner made the decision. But I don't think it was meant to last. And it would have been a shell of what it was. It would have been like the AWA from, like, say, after Wrestle Rock Rumble. And if you know anything about the Wrestle Rock Rumble, besides the rap, you know that it would have been pretty sad. WCW would have at least existed, but would it have been the same? No. Does that mean, by the way, that it would have been necessarily bad? No. We wouldn't have gotten an NWA TNA without WCW going under. We wouldn't have had World Wrestling All-Stars. Yes, that was actually a thing. That was something where they did a bunch of pay-per-views, and it was dog shit, and I retro-reviewed all of them, but good grief. WCW is a hell of a goddamn ride for many wrestling fans. It provides some great goddamn moments, some iconic moments that I will remember till the day I die, which could be any time now. Who knows? Time waits for nobody. But it was a hell of a time to be a wrestling fan. But it was destined to come to an end. Death by 1,000 cuts is what I believe Eric Bischoff said in episode 1. And yeah, death by 1,000 cuts, and then they squeezed lemon juice and shit, and everybody got sepsis and infections, and it just slowly eroded. So on that note, what are your favorite memories of WCW? What do you think of this series overall? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm Charles Rickland. I'll see you soon.